up to 9A1, 9A1, the Mishnah. That's where we said we're going to start. So here we go. Here's the situation. Back in the day, dove cotes, meaning those places where the pigeons roosted, was a big business. Okay, it was big business. The pigeons, it was the rudimentary mail system of the ancient world. It was a place where if you wanted to obviously get, if you wanted to, your pigeon, if you wanted to have a dove, which is a kosher animal, a dove cote, you can go up there and take one and then cook it up in the whole business. So this was important. Now, what happens with regard to dealing with dove cotes? Okay, on Yom Tov. Now, obviously, these dove cotes are on top of the roof, on top of a building, on top of the barn. And so how do you get up there? You got to take a ladder. Now, there were two kind of ladders. There's the regular good old ladder that you would have, and then there was the Pacific dove cote ladders, which were obviously smaller, more movable, more manageable. That makes a difference with regard to whether you're allowed to take them on Yom Tov, or do we run into the rabbinical problem of muksa, something that's really not meant for Yom Tov and not prepared for Yom Tov. So here we go. And again, stop me if anything doesn't make sense, as I'm sure it will. Says the Gemara, says the Mishnah. Again, 9A1. Beis Shammai says, Ein molichin es asula mishoivich l'shoivich. One is not allowed to take a ladder. And at this point, we're dealing with a dove cote ladder. Okay? The ladder that is normally used for a dove cote, okay, may not be taken from one dove cote to another dove cote because it is set aside for this specific dove cote. Aval, but what you are allowed to do is Mateu mechaloin lechaloin. You're allowed to tilt it from the opening of one pigeonhole to the other pigeonhole within the same dove cote. So, if you want to go from one pigeonhole to another pigeonhole within the same enclosure, you're allowed to by tilting the ladder. Beis Hillel matirin. But Beis Hillel says no, it's permitted not just to tilt it from one pigeonhole to another pole within one enclosure, but in fact, you're allowed to take the ladder. And the assumption here is the dove cote ladder, you're allowed to take it from one dove cote to another dove cote. You're allowed to move it around, and there's no problem with muksa. So now, the Gemara is going to go into this machlokes, into this argument. Amar Rav Chana bar Ami, machlokes, this dispute is dafka only birishus sarabim, in the public domain where he might be seen. The Beis Shammai Sabri Haroya Oimes, an onlooker sees it, not knowing what's going on, is going to say Lahatiach Gaga Yehutzarech. He needs it for plastering his roof. In other words, we're being introduced to the idea, Jerry, we're being introduced to the idea of Maris Ayin, what the eye sees. Sometimes a thing is not really problematic. It's only problematic that somebody, an onlooker, might get the wrong idea. And that is enough to create a rabbinical prohibition. Don't use it so not to give an outsider the wrong impression. Because here's the situation. Beis Shammai said, I'm not allowed to take this ladder from dovecote to dovecote. I'm only allowed to use it within the dovecote. Here's the problem. If I'm allowed to use it, it means it's not muksa. If it's not muksa, why can't I take it from one dovecote to another dovecote? So Rav Chana bar Ami is saying the reality is it's not muksa. We're not dealing with muksa like we originally thought. What we're dealing with is, in fact, It's a dovecote ladder, and therefore it's made for the dovecote, and automatically it was prepared for yontif because you might need a pigeon, you might need a dove for the yontif table. The problem here is for somebody on the outside. If your dovecote is in the public domain, they're going to see it, and they're going to make it the wrong impression. They think you're going to plaster your roof, which obviously you're not allowed to do on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Okay, since it gives the impression of wrongdoing, it's usher. Ubesilu sabri shevachai machiach lav. Wrong. The fact that he's using a dovecote ladder, which is the lighter, smaller ladder, as opposed to your regular workman-like ladder, that itself gives evidence, it tests that he's not using it to plaster his roof, that in fact he's dealing with the dovecote, and therefore there's no problem, even in Rishus Harabim, to take from one dovecote to another dovecote. Abel Berishus Hayachin, in a private domain, where his actions are not likely to be misunderstood or to be observed, Divrei Hakol Muta. Even Beis Shammai agrees with Beis Hillel, it's muta to carry the ladder. Good. Now we're on 982. 982. So the Gemara says, Amy, is this true? Is this true? Rabbi Yehuda Marav, Kol Mokim Sha'asu Chachamim, Bifnei Maris Ayin. Now we're being introduced to the words Maris Ayin, wherever the Chazal, the Rabbana, prohibited an act, not because it's in essence wrong, it's perfectly fine, only because of the appearance that it gives to the outside of doing something wrong. In that case, we have a rule: once they go ahead and make a prohibition of Maris Ayin, of we're worried about how it's going to appear, we then have a rule also that even it's prohibited even in your most private of rooms, even your most private of chambers. Therefore, Beis Shammai's restriction should apply even in a private domain. How could you say, Rav Chana bar Ami, that the argument is only in a Rishus Harabim because of Maris Ayin, but in a private domain in Rishus Hayachin, even Beis Shammai agrees with Beis Hillel, I'm not going to worry about Maris Ayin. Every time the Rabbana made a Gezerah of Maris Ayin, they said that it goes even into your most private place, and the reason for that is because if we let you do it in your private place, you're going to end up doing it in a non-private place, and then other people are going to see and jump to the wrong conclusion. So in other words, we had Chazal said, listen, once we make a Gezerah of Maris Ayin, we're going to worry about people jumping to the wrong conclusion if they see what you're doing. We're not going to let you do it even in your most private place, because if we let you do it, because Lamai says it's allowed, you're going to end up doing it in a place where we don't want you to do it because other people are going to see it. Does everybody understand? Okay, so I'm assuming everybody understands. So says the Gemara, in fact, Tanoi, Chana bar Ami is taking his position because it's in that reality that Maris Ayin is even the absolute, even the decree carries over even to the most private of places. It's an argument of the Tanoim. The Tanya we learned in the Beitzah, Shachtan b'chama, if one's clothing is soaked, became wet, and then you get caught in a rain shower in Boca Raton, and then the sun comes out, you're allowed to spread it out in the sun to dry on the Shabbos. But Avuloi Keneged but not before people in an area where people could see it, only in your backyard, not in the front on Mandarin. Because onlookers might come and suspect him of having washed his begodim, of having laundered his clothing on the Shabbos. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Elazar and Shimon prohibited even in a private place, even in your backyard. So you see that the Tanakhama holds in a public place where people could see it on Mandarin, you're not allowed to dry your clothes from the sun because people are going to jump to the wrong conclusion that you stuck it in the laundry and your dryer is broken. But Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon, but in your private area, in your backyard, you're allowed to do it. You're allowed to put it out of the sun. So that the rule of Marisayin only applies in places where it's likely for people to see. Where it's not likely for people to see, Marisayin doesn't apply. Comes Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Shimon and say, no, once Chazal make a gezerah of Marisayin, they decree against Marisayin in public, then it even applies in your most private place, because if we let you do it in your private place, you'll end up coming to do it in the public place. So you see, therefore, Rabbi Yehuda Marav is going like Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Shimon, and Rabbi Chana bar Ami is actually going to the Tanakama that Marisayin is limited to the place where people might see it, not to a place where people are not likely to see it. Now we have a different version of the same argument. Ikedi Amri. The others say that this was the version of the argument. The machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel b'reshus hayachid is only if you're allowed to carry the ladder for the dovecote in a private domain. The Beis Shammai is Sleilu Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, because Beis Shammai agrees with the principle of Rabbi Yehuda Amarav that actions which give up an appearance of wrongdoing, Marisayin, are even also in a secluded area, in a private area. Beis Hillel less than the Rabbi Yehuda Amarav. Beis Hillel does not agree with the principle of Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, and he says in a private area, there's no worry about Marisayin, what people are going to say, and therefore you're allowed to do it. But in the public domain, even Beis Hillel would agree to Beis Shammai that no, you cannot carry the ladder because people might suspect them of plastering the roof. So according to this, it's only Beis Shammai that Beis Hillel agrees with the premise of Rav. Says the Gemara, this is a problem. Learn lame Rav, the Amud ki Beis Shammai. Are you going to say that Rav holds like Beis Shammai? Obviously not, because Lamaisa the halakha is always like Beis Shammai, right? And therefore, and still he says it's mutar afilu b'reshus harabim because of the time, because the ladder itself, which is only for a dovecote ladder, will differentiate from a regular ladder, and people won't make the mistake. It's a kasha Rav Chanan who says the halakha is like Rav Lefnei Chabeh, because the halakha is like Rav Lefnei Chabeh. So says the Gemara Tanai. In fact, what Beis Hillel's position is a matter of a Tanaic dispute. The Tanya Shoichtam Bechama, if one gets caught in the rain and his clothes is soaked, he's allowed to spread it out in the sun. But not but not in front of people where they might make the mistake that think that you did your laundry on Shabbos. Rabbi Elazar Rav Simon, Asurin and Asirin, even in a secluded area. Since the Tanakam of the Beitzah argues on the Chumrah of Rav, it's possible that he defines Beis Hillel as Rav Chana ben Abba does, that carrying a ladder is only prohibited in public, but not in a private area. Okay? Very good. We are now on Amid Beis, on 9b1. 9b1. Now, Masnisin Deloikai Tana. But our Mishnah is not like that Tana Rav Shimon ben Elazar. The Tanya we learned in a Beitzah Amar Rav Shimon ben Elazar, Moed Beis Shammai u Beis Hillel, both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel agree. So Moelichin es Asula b'Moishech l'Shoichet, that you are allowed to take a ladder from one dovecote to another dovecote. Lo nechlaku, their argument is only ela lahachzir, whether you're then allowed to bring the ladder back to its original place. Beis Shammai oimrim ein machzirin. Beis Shammai says you do not return it. Beis Hillel oimrim af mazirin, you are allowed to return it. So even Beis Shammai agrees. Listen, you're entitled to take a bird and use it for yontif. You need food on your table for yontif. But once you did it, leave it alone. Beis Hillel says, no, once I allow you to touch the ladder, you can use the ladder and you can move it any which way you want. Okay? Amar Rabbi Yehuda, says Rabbi Yehuda, again, we're on 9b1 in the left-hand column. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, what are we talking about? Bisulam shel shayvach. Only in the case of a dovecote ladder, that smaller ladder that's used to climb up and deal with the dovecote. Aval bisulam shel aliyah, but with an attic ladder, that means your regular good old ladder. Divrei hakol also, because then there's a suspicion that some people are going to see you and they're going to assume you're going to plaster your roof. Rab Daisa says, Mateu mechaloin lechaloi. You are not allowed to carry the ladder. Okay? And the Gemara, we don't know what ladder Rab Daisa means at the moment. We're going to have to find out. Does he mean a dovecote ladder, or does he mean just the good old regular ladder? The ladder for an aliyah, the attic ladder. We don't know yet. But right now, we're going to say Rab Daisa. Rab Daisa, Mateu mechaloin lechaloi. You're not allowed to carry the ladder from one dovecote to another dovecote. You're merely allowed to tilt it from one pigeonhole to another pigeonhole within one dovecote. Others say Mishum Rab Daisa, in the name of Rab Daisa. They had a different version of Rab Daisa. Af Miradim boy, you're even allowed to walk the ladder from one pigeonhole to another pigeonhole in the same dovecote. If the pigeonholes are too far away from one another within the dovecote, by simply tilting the ladder, you're allowed to move the ladder by walking it, by holding it upright and turning it and shifting it from side to side at a distance at a time. You're not allowed to carry it the normal way. It's called kalachayat, by a different way, with the back of your hand. So now, now, we're very unclear what Rab Daisa held. So we're going to see over here. Hold on. Rabbi Chia's sons went to the village to inspect their fields. And when they came back, Rabbi Chia asked them, did any halacha shayla come to your hand that you had to paskin? Amalai, they said yes. Sulam bali adenu v'tarnu. A case of an attic ladder, that means a regular ladder, to a dovecote came to us, and we allowed it to be used. He said, go back, go back, and Asir tell me you made a mistake. It's actually prohibited, just like we've been learning. Now, Iu Sover, Rab Chia's sons reasoned, we're again on 9b1, we now just started the right column. Inu Sover, Midka Amar Rabbi Yehuda Bisulam Shalaliyah Loi Pligi. Since Rabbi Yehuda said in the Beitzah, the Beisham Misil do not argue. In the case of an attic ladder, a regular ladder, Michlau, which means they said it's no good, Michlau, therefore it must seem the Tana Kama Rab Shimon ben Elazar suffered Pligi. He holds that they do argue in an attic ladder. That Beisham Misil dispute. One can put a regular ladder away after using it in dovecote, but both agree that you're allowed to use such a ladder for a dovecote. This is a big chiddush. By saying that the second half of the Beitzah shows that they're arguing by a regular ladder, it must mean that the Tana Kama, the first Tana of the Beitzah, is not arguing, saying they're not arguing that a regular ladder you are allowed to carry. The only question is, once you use it, you can't use it again. You can't bring it back. That's the argument. Says the Gemara V'lohi. That was a mistake. That's how the sons learned. Rabbi Chia said no. Rabbi Yehuda mitamid Tana Kama Kamafarish. Rabbi Yehuda is coming to explain, not to argue, to explain the position of the Tana Kama. Mimai. What's the thing? Mitaktani, where you learn Malichin as Asulam l'shayvech, when the Beitzah taught from the name of the Tana Kama that you're allowed to take a ladder from one dovecote to another dovecote. It's obvious that the Tanakama is talking about a dovecoat ladder, not a regular big ladder. The Isa Kedachta Besulam Shel Aliyah Pligi, and it becomes the Yomanda Rabbi Beisham Misal are arguing about a regular ladder. Hi Malichin is a Sulam Mimoshik Lemoshik L'Shoyk L'Shoyk L'Shoyk. Then the statement of the Tanakama, one who takes a ladder from one dovecoat to another goat, Malichin is a Sulam L'Shoyk Miboyle. It should have said one takes a ladder to a dovecoat. In other words, that the ladder was being used somewhere else. That it's not a ladder used normally for a dovecoat. It's a ladder used for something else, i.e. an attic ladder, a good old regular ladder. The language of the Beitzah clearly seems to say we're dealing with the unit known as a dovecoat, and that the ladder is its ladder, the dovecoat ladder. It's not a big ladder, and what he called, it's not a regular house ladder. That's what it should have said. So, Elalav Hochikama. This is what the Tanakama means to say when he says that the ladder was originally at the dovecoat. Shel Shoivich in the case of a dovecoat, there's a machlokes between Beisham and Beis, whether you can bring the ladder back or not. Shel Aliyah Loi. But in the case of an attic ladder, there's no dispute. And in fact, the Tanakama would agree with Aser taking an attic ladder to a dovecoat that he cannot use it even in the first place to reach up into the dovecoat. So the Tanakama now explains of Chia's sons, who understood the Tanakama was referring to an attic ladder, and that's where the argument is. Dealt with the individual drawn by Rechia that it's referring to a dovecoat ladder. We're on 9b2. The Idach, the sons of Rechia, the way we just explained it makes it pretty obvious that the Tanakama was not talking about a regular ladder, but a dovecoat ladder. So they say, no, Mikatani Sulam Shel Shaivach. Does the Beitzah say anything about clearly that it's a dovecoat ladder? Mishaivach L'Shaivach Katani. All it says to be used from one dovecoat to another dovecoat. The Tanakama uses the terminology only that you can take a ladder from one dovecoat to another. By using the generic word ladder, it obviously means, according to the sons of Rav Chia, it means your regular ladder that you use on a daily basis, your house ladder. And that means you're allowed to use it in the first place, according to them, to go climb up to the dovecoat. It's the wrong ladder. No. On Yom Tov, you're allowed to take your doves out for the table on Yom Tov for your Simchas Yom Tov. Afterwards, we can have an argument whether you can take it back or not. That's a different story. Give me 1 second. Sorry, battling a bad cold. Here we go. So says the Gemara, and you can even take it to as many dovecoats as you need. The attic on the ladder on the discussion is the attic ladder. Now we have the same Gemara, just from a different point of view. Ikadi Amri, here was the story. Amrullah, Rav Chia said to the Rav Chia sons of Rav Chia, this is the halacha shaila we had. Hitu sulam shel aliyah, straight out. Now it says, Hitu sulam shel aliyah, a case of tilting an attic ladder. Bali yadenu v'targanu, and we permitted it. An attic ladder from one pigeonhole to another within one dovecoat, and we allowed it. Amalahen, Rav Chia sent them back to v'osu mashi yitartem. Go and ask what you permitted. Inu suffer. Rav Chia's sons thought, my ka'asa Tanakama, kashari Rav Daisa. What the Tanakama prohibits, okay, which in this case would be Rav Yehuda, Rav Daisa therefore permits. When Rav Yehuda prohibited the attic ladders categorically, meaning that you can never use a regular ladder for your dovecoats on Shabbos and Yom Tov, Rav Daisa responds, you're allowed to use it for tilting an attic ladder within one dovecoat from one pigeonhole to another. But that's not correct. In fact, what Rabbi Tanakama permits, Rabbi Daisa forbids. Although Rabbi Yehuda prohibits the use of a regular ladder. He allows you to use the dovecote ladder, right, for a dovecote. And this Rabbi Daisa says that even in the case of a dovecote ladder, one is not allowed to carry the ladder. One may only tilt it from one pigeonhole to one pigeonhole within the same dovecote. According to this, Rabbi Daisa is very limited in that even a dovecote ladder can only be used for its specific dovecote, and you could use it to tilt within one dovecote. Now we go further. Fine. Abel Mateu mechaloin lechaloin. Beis Shammai said you're allowed to tilt the ladder from one opening of the pigeonhole to another opening of the pigeonhole in the same dovecote. But you're not allowed to carry the ladder from one dovecote to another, even if the intent is merely to get birds for your table on Yom Tov. Beis Hillel, on the other hand, allows you to carry the ladder from one dovecote to another dovecote. And in Pashtus, we're dealing with what ladder? A dovecote ladder. Says the Gemara, Alma, what do you see? Gabe Simchas Yom Tov, regarding the mitzvah of a joyful Yom Tov, Beis Shammai lechumra, Beis Hillel lekula. Beis Shammai is stringent, and Beis Hillel is lenient. Because you need these birds for your meal. Your meal is Simchas Yom Tov. It helps the joy of Yom Tov. Nonetheless, Beis Shammai says you can only use it within one dovecote from one pigeonhole to another. You can't take it to another dovecote. And Beis Hillel says, no, you're allowed to. But that's a problem, because if you remember the beginning of our Masechta, all the way back on that base, about 10 days ago, we said, one who slaughters a wild animal or a fowl on Yom Tov for consumption on Yom Tov, Beis Shammai said, and we learned this Gemara. This was the Gemara that was yesterday's Gemara. Beis Shammai Oimrim, you're allowed to dig in the ground with a spade, bring up some dirt, and cover the animal's blood with the earth he covered dig up. Beis Hillel Oimrim, you're not allowed to slaughter the animal at all unless there was earth prepared from the day before, from Erev Yom Tov or Erev Shabbos, from the previous day. So what do you see? The machlokes of kisoy adam, covering up the blood, arises between an issa d'rabbanan, a rabbinic prohibition, and the need to procure food for one's Yom Tov. Beis Shammai rules leniently, and Beis Hillel rules stringently. This is a reverse of our Mishnah. Beis Shammai says it's okay, you can dig up the dirt and cover it up. Beis Hillel says, no, you can't, and don't check the animal lichatchila in the first place on Yom Tov. That's different than our case of our Mishnah, where Beis Hillel is the makel and allows you to carry the ladder from one dovecote to another dovecote. And Beis Hillel limits you, Beis Shammai limits you to one dovecote. Amar Rabbi Yochanan muflach hashita. So reverse the shitas. Actually, it's Beis Hillel rules that you may not take a ladder to the dovecote, and Beis Shammai, the one that says you are allowed to. It's Beis Hillel in our Mishnah that's actually the Chomer. He says you can only use the ladder within its own dovecote, and it'll be Beis Shammai that says you're allowed to carry it to the other. Says the Gemara, Mimai, who said you got to change the way we look at our Mishnah? In fact, Dilma Ad Kan Lo Yikomer Beis Shammai Hosam. So far, Beis Shammai did not say that one may dig into the earth, except we're now on 9b3, where a spade is already in the ground from before, in which case there is no prohibition. The spade was already in the ground, it already loosened up the dirt, so it doesn't look like chorish, plowing, which of course is usher on Shabbos and Yom Tov. But where no spade was inserted to the ground, Beis Shammai would agree you're not allowed to dig into the ground. He would agree with Beis Hillel. So Khan also, the Inami, you could say Ad Khan like Kami Beis Hillel Haka. That Beis Hillel didn't rule leniently regarding Yontif, only here. In the case of carrying a ladder from one dovecote to another dovecote, because the dovecotes are right here, and therefore they attest him that he's dealing with the dovecotes and he's not going to plaster his roof. Avol Hassam, in the case of digging dirt, where there's a rabbinical decree, is applicable according to Beis Hillel. They do not waive for the sake of Simchas Yontif. So let me just see if this is where I want to stop, or so we're going to stop over here. Okay, well, we're going to stop over here at the end bottom. And now we're about to say, as Rabbi Yochanan is on record, that in the dispute between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, their opinions must be reversed in order to get to the point that where, in this case, Beis Hillel is more stringent and Beis Shammai is more lenient. And then the Gemara says, it's unnecessary. We showed you how it could all work itself out without changing the shittas. The Gemara now, because it's saying over there is one situation, our Mishnah was another situation. The Gemara now proposes that Rabbi Yochanan's statement was made to resolve the following difficulty. Where Rabbi Yochanan says you got to switch the opinions, we have it written down word, it's because of other opinions. And this is where we're going to stop.